The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
Welcome to Squawk Box Europe. I'm Karen Cho with Steve Sedgwick and Ben Boulos. These are your headlines. War in the Middle East intensifies, the US targeting more than 1,000 Iranian sites, including Revolutionary Guard Command facilities, while Tehran hits the US Embassy in Riyadh. President Trump says he's prepared to extend the conflict as long as necessary.
We have the strongest and most powerful by far military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We projected 4 to 5 weeks. But we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it.
Oil and gas shipping rates surge as Iran claims it has shut the Strait of Hormuz and vows to target any ships passing through, whilst Qatar announces it is halting LNG production.
Equity markets in Asia come under heavy pressure, with the Kospi returning to trade and falling more than 7%. Futures in Europe and the US point towards more selling in today's session.
Okay, let's get you up to date. The war in the Middle East is intensifying, with the US sending more troops to the region as Washington continues its strikes on Iran. The US Central Command said it had destroyed command and control facilities of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as well as air defense capabilities and drone and missile launch sites. In his first public appearance since the war began, the US President Donald Trump justified the strikes and outlined the objectives of Washington's military campaign.
This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. And they are indeed sick and sinister. Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon. I said that from the beginning. They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggested the US would up the ante in days to come.
I'm not going to give away the details of our tactical efforts, but the hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now. Someone was screaming, how long will it take? I don't know how long it'll take. We have objectives. We will do this as long as it takes to achieve those objectives, and we will achieve those objectives. The world will be a safer place when we're done with this operation.
We've been watching market reaction for the past 24 hours or so, and it has been interesting. We had a step up in the oil price, no doubt about the 6% pop that we saw in prices across the board, another 2% plus today. You can see a WTI now perched at 73 the handle and 80 on Brent this morning. Economists watching what the ramifications are, the higher oil price, the reset, what it could mean for base effects now if it continues in this vein, and the consequences that has for the inflation story globally and also growth. So significant stories still playing out on the oil stories. We watch the Strait of Hormuz and how supplies could be disrupted from the Middle East. The gold price, that has been the go-to trade for a lot of the safe haven traders. But don't forget, the gold price has already been extremely elevated in recent weeks and months. So again, we're just topping up on some of those levels, another 0.25%. If we had not seen the price action prior to the conflict, what sort of spike would we have seen? So in the context where there has already been very strong trading around this gold price in recent months. So 5/3/24 morning session. And nat gas, that's where a lot of the action was also contained. We saw a spike of about 45% in the session yesterday for TTF nat gas, that ICE Dutch future. And you can see now this morning, 38% over the 1 week basis is what we're watching. And the UK on nat gas prices as well, 60% higher. So very strong repricing around the supply side. What we've got in the Asian markets, also very large swings we're now watching out of this market. The South Korean market, for me, is the one to watch. Don't forget, the EM story has been front and centre around diversification trades this year, but the strength that we saw in the US dollar yesterday in reaction to the conflict has now put a question mark around some of those EM trades. The favoured ones have been South Korea, up a whopping 75% last year and continuing to bounce aggressively this year. That market and Taiwan have been the ones to watch, and you can see down heavily, more than 7% is what we're watching. There were warnings, then you see in a market that's gone up this much, be very careful. But in the context here, why was that market up? Well, it was around the concerns that we were facing a memory chip crunch. Has any of that gone away as we now talk about some of the supply issues that we could be facing around the Gulf region? So interesting to watch that. Samsung, as I mentioned, that stock is the one right at the forefront of the memory chip glut. And you can see it is peeling back aggressively, down almost 10%. SK Hynix, the other one, down 11%. So is it about supply of AI equipment, whether any of that story takes a hit on the back of the uncertainty now that we're facing around Iran? I want to take you to European futures. It was a bumpy old session. Morning session, it looked like we might be contained. We actually saw markets trying to minimise some of the damage after about the first 2 hours of trade. But the afternoon session was much weaker. So we did pull back and eventually down more than 2.5% on the German stock market, the DAX. So as we look to get going this morning, you can see we're looking to give back more territory. We haven't found a floor just yet in terms of that selling here in Europe. But again, the preferred markets, the ones that have been traded to the upside more than other markets, are the ones that are feeling the brunt of the selling. Again, on the back of this immediate reaction to the tensions we're seeing now in the Middle East. To what we're seeing elsewhere, away from the European futures to the US markets, the market there was much more resilient, again to the point where we'd seen selling in recent weeks around the AI obsolescence story. It had taken some of the heat out of the market already. So in fact, we saw the S&P 500 actually gaining territory yesterday, along with the NASDAQ up about 1/3%. In that context this morning, we are looking a little bit soggy. We look to be giving back some territory from the early implications that the market is showing us on US futures, Ben.
Well, overnight, the US Embassy in Riyadh was hit by 2 drones. This is, according to Saudi Arabia's defense ministry, confirming that, causing what it described as a limited fire with minor material damage. No injuries were reported. A senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard official has said the Strait of Hormuz is closed and Tehran will attack any ship attempting to pass through the vital oil transit route, according to remarks carried on state media. But Fox News reports US Central Command as saying the strait remains open. Dan joins us now with the latest from the region. Dan, I suppose it is almost semantics whether the strait is formally closed or open. If the danger is perceived there by shipping companies, they will avoid that route.
You're exactly right, Ben. It is fair to say that the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed here. We've already seen shippers deciding to attempt to reroute. We have skyrocketing insurance costs as well, and even the threat alone that Iran is now presenting, with the IRGC suggesting that they would set fire to any ship that attempts to make that journey, is enough to stop ships from attempting to make the journey, right? So obviously this is a really critical situation now in the region. In fact, energy experts have called this a worst case scenario. It's part of the reason we have fears growing around the energy trade, and in particular energy infrastructure, with infrastructure in both Saudi Arabia and Qatar also being hit. In fact, Qatari LNG production remains offline right now, all production in its entirety, and that is really significant. This shutdown, combined with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, also has immediate implications for European energy security. So taking a look at some of the numbers here, Qatar is about 20% of global LNG. So benchmark European gas prices, this is the Dutch TTF, soared by nearly 50% on the day in reaction to that news because it's just so much LNG that's been knocked offline. Qatar accounts for about 12 to 15% of Europe's LNG imports. So the sudden loss of these Qatari volumes, if it's sustained, is going to leave a really expensive gap for Europe. Europe is going to need to bid with Asia for available spot cargoes. And energy markets are, of course, reacting to that as well. We haven't heard from European policymakers about what this is going to mean mid to long term. And of course, the effort now inside Qatar is to bring that production back online to avoid what could be an energy price shock for some of Qatar's main buyers. And of course, it's not just the spike that we've seen in gas as well, it's also this spike that we're seeing in the price of oil too. You can see Brent at 80.35 right now, WTI at 73.21, both contracts still elevated here, up by 3.3 and 2.7% respectively. This pop coming after Iran claimed it had closed the Strait of Hormuz, again the most important choke point in the global oil trade. What we are seeing now as well is perhaps renewed concerns around other Gulf energy infrastructure too. If the Iranians can target the likes of Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia, then it also means that other Gulf infrastructure and energy infrastructure facilities could also be at risk. Meanwhile, we're also monitoring news flow out of the region. The US State Department has ordered in the last hour the departure of non-emergency US government personnel and family members from Bahrain, from Iraq and from Jordan. And that comes after Saudi Arabia's defense ministry also confirmed this morning that the US embassy in Riyadh was attacked by 2 drones. That is a really important moment. The embassy in Riyadh is very significant. This is the largest economy in the Gulf. And of course, the US is a key Saudi ally. So attacking that embassy in Riyadh is quite a symbolic attack and, of course, will not be taken lightly by the Americans. We have also seen more activity on the US side as well. CENTCOM saying it's destroyed Iran's IRGC command and control facilities, as well as air defense systems, missile and drone launch sites, and military airfields as well. And that will be welcome news here in the Gulf as we see more Iranian missile and drone attacks being leveled towards cities like Abu Dhabi, for example, where we have also heard reports of loud explosions and interceptions as early as this morning. It's back over to you.
Great work, Dan. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get to Hannah Neumann, who is MEP, and chair of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with Iran. Really good to see you today, Hannah. Look, once again, this current conflict has showed perhaps the impotency of the EU, of Europe on the global stage, despite many leaders over the years saying to me, to you and to everyone else who listen, we need to match our economic might in Europe with geopolitical strength as well. Hannah, we're just having to pick up the pieces, aren't we?
Yeah, we have indeed seen that this recent escalation and the attacks of the USA and Israel on Iran have caught everyone not by surprise, but also very few people have informed. Even the German Chancellor in Germany, being the biggest state of the European Union, has just been informed a few minutes in advance. And we have at the moment mainly to deal with the repercussions on the European Union, in the European Union, but also trying to see what we can do together with our partners in the Gulf to de-escalate the situation.
With respect, Hannah, I think you know it's very difficult for us to do anything in Europe to de-escalate the situation. The US president and Israel are calling all the shots here, Iran on the other side. Is there anything that Europe can actually do to have more influence?
What we see at the moment is that the Iran retaliatory actions are quite grave. They seem to be bigger than what has been expected, also by the US and our partners in the Gulf, because although they eliminated the leadership, we see kind of automated escalation and retaliatory attack plans coming outside from Iran. So there we can and should use diplomatic channels that we still have to maybe make someone in the regime reconsider this kind of escalation. We also need to work together, and that's something we only can do as the European Union together, to see how we can best evacuate European citizens from the region and how we can create some buffers in our energy security, but also the delivery chains in case of the situation dragging on like that, and especially the Strait of Hormuz continuing to be blocked.
The first point you made, Hannah, around the leadership, the shifting sands here around the leadership of Iran following the killing of the supreme leader. President Trump alluding to not knowing who's in charge now as well. How complex does that make the situation?
Well, the Iranian regime has for a long time apparently prepared for these kind of attacks happening. So they have very clear lines of succession that kind of automatically kick in right now. They have decentralized their military commands and they have automatic attack plans. So even if there's no communication between Tehran and other big cities and military bases, for example, kind of knows what they are supposed to do. We also saw Hezbollah now coming in. So this is indeed making things more and more complicated. And I don't know to what degree USA and Israel has been prepared for that. What also adds a bit to, let's say, the confusion and the frustration here on the European side is that we get very different communication what the actual goal of this war is. Is it just basically eliminating the nuclear threat? Is it regime change? What is their plan in terms of timeline? And on this one, we are at the moment trying to clarify it.
Hannah, the Iranians have been very clear to make this a much wider conflict and to extract maximum pain where it can. One of the implications has been for the energy price. We've seen that for oil, but also now for nat gas. Europe has been at pains to ensure it has some form of energy security, but we are talking about large amounts of energy that are now being upended for the Europeans. How strong is the position here in Europe in terms of stockpiling? What does the situation look like in terms of the economic consequences?
So this is indeed some of the worries of the European Commission, but also of us inside the Parliament. The stockpiles are different from member state to member state. And we now need to see how we can further diversify. I mean, we had the need to diversify away from Russian gas and oil. A lot of this diversification went towards the Arabian Peninsula. That we see as our partners in this, but right now, because of the blockage, we have to see how we can further diversify. There are at the moment discussions going on with countries in Asia, for example, that still have higher stockpiles of gas and where it might be possible to transport back and forth. This is one of the main discussions the Commission is having this week. But this crisis, again, shows very clearly Europe will only be free if it's fossil free and if we develop have our own energy sources and are much more resilient to these kind of attacks and shocks.
Hannah, it's Ben here jumping in. I just wonder what you make of Spain's decision to deny the use of its military bases to US forces and the signal that sends to Washington in terms of how reliable a partner Europe is in this.
Well, I'm not sure if or how reliable we can be a partner to a US military aggression to which we were not informed, to which we do not know the goals, and we don't know where it will end. So if the US wants us to be a reliable partner, I think they have to share much more of what they are up to so that we can make a proper assessment. We are at the moment looking quite at a dilemma, and that is also reflected in the responses of the European Union. The attacks of Israel and the USA are against international law. And it is quite unclear if they will lead to the desired results. At the same time, everything that this Iranian regime has done for decades is against international law. The proxy wars in the region, the nuclear program, and the massacres that we have seen in January this year, but they have repressed their population brutally over decades. So what we see at the moment is really an erosion of international law and to what kind of big escalations this can lead. So beyond this conflict, we have to find ways and means to strengthen and reform international institutions so that they can properly enforce international law. And this kind of balancing act is one that we are at the moment also discussing inside the European Union, how to deal with that.
I'm just slightly confused about where your stance is on this, because you sort of say the behaviour of Iran and the regime was against international law. You say the US action is against international law. Do you think that the regime should have stayed in place? Do you think the US should have attacked or not?
I think this regime has to fall. I'm just not sure if the plan that the US and Israel have right now will lead to this. We have seen far too often in the past in the Middle East that good intentions do not necessarily lead to good outcomes, and especially the US has seen that. And that keeps me at the moment a bit cautious in terms of endorsing one position or another, especially if I don't know the strategy behind that. Because what we currently hear from the US administration is we're going to bomb down the military bases, we're going to kill the key leadership, but then there is a huge gap in the plan towards we have a free, which I truly hope we will get. But this gap is about the most difficult part of this whole endeavor. And on this one, before I can endorse anything or before we should have a discussion whether we support this, we really need to get a proper and a very good and solid understanding of what the plan is.
OK. Hannah Neumann, MEP and Chair of the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with Iran, thank you very much for joining us. Still to come on the show, concerns grow over the UK's inflation outlook as the price of natural gas surges almost 50% in a single day ahead of today's spring statement. But it's not just the UK. JP Morgan chief Jamie Dimon warns an extended conflict in the Middle East could drive global prices higher. And we'll bring you more from Arjun's conversation with Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon. All of that is coming up right here on Squawk Box Europe.
Executive Decisions is the new podcast from CNBC, where I ask powerful leaders about their decisions that changed everything. I'm Steve Sedgwick. Here's the CEO of the London Stock Exchange Group, Julia Hoggett.
There is no justification whatsoever for not doing the right thing, even if the right thing is hard to do. Which also means that if the context changes or the information changes, it is absolutely fine to also change your mind.
That's Executive Decisions with me, Steve Sedgwick. Get it wherever you're listening to this.
A lot of big questions around tech and the Middle East now, as Amazon says its data centers in the UAE and Bahrain were damaged by drone strikes. The company's cloud unit, Amazon Web Services, said 2 of its facilities were directly struck, while another drone strike nearby damaged infrastructure. AWS says it is working to restore full services, but it may take an extended period of time. And just a reminder by numbers, roughly $125 billion in specific AI deals in the region last year. So does any of that get impacted by what we're now seeing on our screens today? Well, telecom and tech companies are gathering at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona this week. But geopolitics is casting a shadow over the event. A number of executives from Asia and the Middle East were held up in transit or had their flights cancelled en route. And Palo Alto's chief security officer warned that the Iran conflict will likely trigger a number of cyber attacks in coming days. Network connectivity is also in focus at MWC amid reports that Iran has been plunged into a near-total internet blackout. Arjun spoke to Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon about his expectations for the next generation of mobile network technology, 6G.
Just thinking of communication standpoint, we need a lot of uplink, because see what you see, hear what you hear, and all of those agents and in context has a lot of uplink. But that's not the main story of 6G. Consumers will see faster, better, more ability to have agents that are relevant to you. That's what they're going to see. But what the network's going to see is much more. It's a sensing network. You're going to be able to do air traffic control for drones. You'll be able to see all the cars in the road. It's going to revolutionize how I think about digital twins and maps and much more.
AI is the other big theme at Mobile World Congress this year, and Arjun's been discussing the role of the technology on labour markets with one of Japan's biggest CEOs. Well, let's get out to Arjun for more. Arjun, I was saying yesterday how this event has been disrupted in the past by the war in Ukraine, but it's such a significant change around the geopolitics now, because everything we've been hearing around Israel and the technology it used to try and have these attacks on Iran, it was hacking of traffic lights, for instance, the connectivity that's been required for air defence systems now, even the communication on the ground when it comes to Iran. And on top of this, the huge build out of AI in the Middle East. So it's such a significant story for those at Mobile World Congress.
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. And the executives that I've spoken to here on the ground, they're waiting and seeing, most of them are saying, to see where this is actually going to disrupt, whether it's on the investment side, whether it's particularly on the supply chain side as well, given that we already have supply chain issues when it comes to things like memory, whether that gets exacerbated by some of these disruptions. Of course, connectivity, a huge part of that as well, given there's increasing talk here around things like satellite technology, which is becoming increasingly important in defense as well. So lots of those discussions taking place here. But there is also a sense of a lot of these companies still staying focus on what they want to deliver in terms of AI technology, in terms of next generation connectivity around things like 6G as well. So those conversations are continuing. Of course, what is happening in the Middle East is weighing on some of those conversations. But just to bring you some of the highlights, I spoke to Miki Mikitani, who is, of course, the CEO of Rakuten, one of Japan's biggest technology companies. It's a company that spans e-commerce to online travel agents to investment products, all the way through to its big bet on mobile networks as well. And it says it's trying to expand AI use across its business, including using user data with permission to train some of its own LLMs. This brings on to the conversation, of course, what AI is going to do to the workforce more broadly. And that conversation follows those big layoffs we saw at Block, and Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Block, warning more companies could follow suit. So I started by asking Miki Mikitani a bit about the AI strategy and what this might mean for his organization. Let's listen in.
Basically, three parts, right? Obviously, the network management, including what we call RIC, in a radio intelligent controller. We manage our radios utilizing AI. Some the macros are not so much used, so we kind of maybe power down a little bit, and we are saving a lot of our electricity consumption, about 20% compared with before. And definitely for the marketing, we are heavily using our AI to really think about how we can improve our retention rate, how we can improve our ARPU, and so forth and so forth. And the third part is really how we can utilize the data we have, which is generated through our mobile service as well as from our ecosystem services. We have about 7 trillion data transaction logs every year. It's huge. And when you talk about AI, I think AI is a kind of refinery of the data. And the gold mine is the data. And Rakuten definitely has a very unique set of data, because we are number one e-commerce company, number one a travel agent, number one credit card, number one a bank, number one on a brokerage firm, and we have all these other services. And on top of that, now we have the data from mobile service.
Is your organization changing as a result of AI? There was a very interesting story in the past few days ago. US company Block laid off thousands of employees, then directly attributed that to AI, saying that the workforce is changing. And Jack Dorsey, the CEO, said, I think that other organizations are going to follow this kind of move in the next year or so. Do you see that happening at Rakuten?
Yes. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it is not so easy for most of the countries to, basically lay off people. So we have to be very, very careful and respectful for the labor regulatory requirements. At the same time, what we are trying to do right now is, instead of outsourcing it, we are in-housing it. So whatever we have been outsourcing to outsourcing companies, we are taking in to our own services. For example, we used to use what we call digital agency to promote our services. We basically took them in-house. So our staff is functioning as kind of in-house ad agency. That not only brought our marketing costs down, but they started to think about utilizing AI. How can we make our marketing efficiency much more efficient. So at Rakuten, we have what we call triple 20. What it is using AI, we would like to improve our marketing efficiency by 20%, and we would like to improve our operating efficiency by 20%, and we want to make sure that our client will benefit from our service by 20%. And I think we have achieved already like 12 to 13% of that.
Fascinating insight there from Mickey Mikitani. He was saying that effectively they're in-housing some of those external agencies but not increasing headcount. So a different take on how AI is impacting jobs, giving people more to do but with fewer headcount, hoping those AI tools can make up for the efficiency. So certainly AI is impacting the workforce at even some of those big companies like Rakuten over in Japan. For now, guys, back to you.